To give it to Mark.
Well,
Well, this is a very, very different sort of talk. I would like to just spend a little bit more time in my headspace from your guys' talk, but we're going to bounce back into lots of practical tips about the journey of an idea and guide us through the choices that we make as we go through. So I'm Del, I'm from Hereford College of Arts, and I'm really excited to be here with a team of new master's students. And yeah, we're going to tell you a little bit about the pedagogy that we've developed in Hereford and how you can take some of this information and start developing ideas. So yeah, this is a little bit about how we do it. The journey of an idea, design pedagogy in practice. You see, this is why I've got my right hand. Okay, so you can come closer. I'm going to go over there. I don't think there's so much multitasking that I can't do. Right, so we do art school for blacksmiths. We've got a degree in artist blacksmithing, so you come as an undergrad and spend 3 years with us, and a new master's program in forged metal arts. Yay! Mainly because of Brexit. So here we've got some images of the National School of Blacksmithing in Hereford. On our undergraduate programme, we have about 70 students focused on forged metal. And then if we keep scrolling. So what does art school for? Oh, the other thing is that this presentation is going to be available. And so you can scroll through it in your own time. There's lots and lots of links in it as well. And so it'll be on the website. So depending on how slow or how fast, I'm going to be kept to time over here. And so all this information you'll be able to look at another time. So what we're really about in Hereford is we do a rigorous technical training. Some of our students come from a forged metal background, some of them from an art school background. We want them to learn the craft, but really what we want them to do is explore their authentic voice. What do they want to say with the work and the practice they develop? And we want that to be underpinned by theory. So we're really interested in the relationship between theory and practice. And the really great thing about today is I've got these students here that are going to tell you about their journey and how they put this pedagogy into action. And what we're really looking for at the end of those 3 years is students that understand who they are, that can talk about their work with confidence and can articulate their ideas clearly. Okay, got that? Awesome. Right, so this is just a little insight from this year's show. Keep scrolling. To give you a sense of the range of objects. So, you know, like we are passionate about working with forged metal, but the outcomes are as diverse as the students' imagination. So from architectural work, from objects to this extraordinary piece, which was all about G working with a group of travellers, having written a story and doing a performance. And so anything is possible, but we all know we're passionate about working with metal. Awesome. So today I've been given the task about talking about how we develop ideas and as a model that I hope you'll listen from. How can I take some of this thinking back into my workshop, into my space, and apply some of those Hereford ideas? And I'm sure that a lot of you do this in your own studios. So for those people, it'll be really affirming. But this is the most straightforward, easy diagram, but it makes a real difference to help you sort out that head. So when you design and make an object, and it seems really obvious, but the best drawings really are, you need to have conversation around your ideas, and we're going to talk a lot about ideas today, but also about like process. So the sort of skills and making that's important to us, materials, and we've just had a fantastic example of lots of different sorts of materials. For some of our students, it's steel. So, you know, that's a quite straightforward answer. But, and then you need to also think about that outcome. So have that conversation. But sometimes when you're like trying to work out where your ideas are coming from and how to start on a project, it's really great to do some bullet points here and work out where your gaps are and where your strengths are. And so in this group, we love forging. We love forging. And so when it comes to the process section, you'll have lots of bullet points. You know, the sort of forging you want to do, you know, the sort of qualities you like in that material. And then other times, other areas are a little bit more skinny. So it can just really help work things out. And you can also put images next to that as well. That really helps you see where your gaps are, where your strengths are. Thank you to my lovely able assistant. And so I'm going to go over this bit quite quickly. Where do ideas come from? Because, and they come from a whole variety of different places. And when we're thinking, our ideas usually are our brains are very busy. And so they come from a combination of these things. Personal research, we talk a lot about that, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. So when you sort of like look into the mirror and think, you know, what are the things that really inspire me? You know, who am I? You know, what theme do I want to explore? What experiences have I had that really form the basis of what I want to talk about? What do I want to communicate as a maker? What is my intention? Yesterday, Heiner started talking to us about the new grave marker project, and I know that he'd like me to encourage you all to work to that 1st of December deadline and to think about your response to that brief, your response to those ideas. And so sometimes ideas come because you are given a really, really clear brief. Scroll. Oh. Narrative. And so I think that we've had some wonderful examples over the last few days about things that are really inspired, and your ideas come from literature, from myth, from personal stories. And so this is all information that I'm sure you all know, but at a talk that's around idea development, it's a good thing to start off by asking, where do ideas come from? Technology. And so Heiner always likes to drop a bit about technology into his lectures to challenge us as how we're going to react as a community to new technology, whether it's 3D printing or AI, or just the ability to be able to like laser cut out sections and think about how, or use that wonderful new induction forge that's up in the workshop. So technology can really help and can really spur and infuse you in terms of developing ideas. There is the opportunity to respond to ethical and social engagement. So thinking about how you want to make a positive impact on the world, how you want to address something that's environmental or that's social, something that changes lives, supports community. And so those could be where some of your ideas come from. Back to our safe space, material and process. So often our ideas come from working with the stuff, from that wonderful upset or the movement of a bit of steel that really inspires. I have students that like hold their precious sample. You know, this is just exciting. So we're all comfortable with the idea that our ideas can grow from our connection with material and the way that we work. Sometimes, as Joachim talked about yesterday, ideas come from traditional practice within the vernacular, or playing with that and how you can move between those things, use some of that history, but reappropriate it, change it. And all of us, as forged metal makers, draw on that sense of forging and tradition, even if our ideas are quite different. So there is that sort of space for looking at traditional practice within the vernacular. And sometimes your ideas come from thinking about the function of what you're going to make. So ideas are very complex. They come from lots of different places, and you have to, and this is probably what all of our brains are doing right now. So, you know, like you've got a sense of how you might respond to that brief, or you've been talking to a client, and so you've got that sort of nub of an idea. And there are all of these creative possibilities. And I love this drawing because it just reminds you that you're not mad. You know, that actually wherever you are in your process of developing ideas and thinking, there are so many choices about what you can explore and how you can push things forward. Yeah, I guess that's the reason why a lot of us keep a notebook in our back pocket to capture those ideas. But what you have to do is like make choices, otherwise you're frozen with all the possibilities. Sometimes when I'm giving tutorials, I get really excited about loads of these possibilities, and I can see students looking at me and going, "You crazy woman, you've talked about 10 different things." And that's absolutely true. But it's really important that you get to choose. But understanding all of those possibilities makes so much sense. And again, you know, like in your journals and in your books, you can do these arrows and write little notes to them, because one morning when you wake up and you feel more empty in terms of ideas, you can revisit this drawing and then go back to some of those ideas that you left, that you chose a different way. We all experience this. I call it the upside down Christmas tree. It's that convergent and divergent thinking. So you start off and you're responding, and you've got like grave marker on the top of the list, and that seems like quite specific. And then after the last few days, you realize that there's so many possibilities. So you choose something. You might choose a particular person, a particular location, particular memory, and you persuade yourself that that's really narrow and that it's really specific. And as soon as you've made that choice, it springs back into lots of possibilities. And so this convergent and divergent thinking happens all the way through the creative process. And at each point, you've got to keep making choices and testing, selecting, and iterating. So this is our drawing of what we all know we do, which is we have to identify an idea, we have to test things, and then we have to make stuff. But it gives you a little bit more detail, and it's the pedagogy that we use all the time. So in terms of stage one, identify and mobilizing the idea, we're going to talk about that first. You need to identify your general idea. You need to collect primary and secondary source material. It's really useful to use words to understand what you're analysing. What are you looking at? What lens are you wearing when you're looking at your board? Form a really clear question about what your intention is. And intention is so important, to know what you're wanting to communicate. And start drawing, absolutely, draw every day. Jorgen, I'm glad you said that. Let's say it again. Keep drawing, and drawing in its biggest word of whatever that is. It could be maquette making, it could be working with ink, it could be working with wire, but keep drawing. So stage one is all about identifying and mobilizing the idea. And I really encourage you to use the walls of your studio. Oh, I feel like we ought to talk about Pete Matilla. Yeah. What did Pete Matilla say he did in his workshop? Because this was magic.
Yeah, so Pete Matilla, it's a fantastic blacksmith, but he used a charcoal paint and painted the entirety of his workshop. And so he could then use chalk. And so he literally lived and worked inside of his sketchbook. So his entire workshop was his sketchbook. which was just phenomenal. Really cool idea. And it means, you know, if you think, oh, where's that sketch that I did? Oh, there it is, it's on the ceiling.
So I love a sketchbook, but I think there's something really weird about a sketchbook. You put your ideas down, you turn the page, and it's like it's all gone because it's on the previous page. And so a big part of what's important here is, oh look, Lewis, there's you with long. Is to get it out in your space, because it's only when you get it out in your space that you can begin to see the connections that you've formed and the ideas that you've got. And so a lot of you will think, that's okay, I do this in my brain. And a lot of students live under that illusion as well. I have a full-time job crawling into their mind palaces to understand what their ideas are. Don't do it just in your brain. It's and do it on your wall. Either in pink Matilla with paint, or in your studio, or in the bathroom, or in the kitchen, wherever you've got space. Get all of that information on the wall, because then you can really look at it. Doing it in your head, not in your sketchbook, is just not enough. You've got to get it on the wall. If there's one thing that you learn from today, get it out, get it on the wall. Okay, so at this stage, we call this stage beginning approaches, and we coin it 50 images and 50 words. But of course, there might be 120, or there might be 40. So it's just the idea that all of the source material, get it out on the wall. Investing in your research base is crucial, and you can really hear that from some of the talks we've had in the last few days. You need to be an expert in your research base. Don't just look at things for their visual qualities. Understand what the meaning is, understand the significance. Really research, become an expert in your whatever you've chosen, your idea, whatever you've chosen to explore. I think when you're working as professionals and you're working out how to pay the mortgage and making sure you can pay for everything, and often your clients don't pay you for the design process, it's really easy to slip into the habit of doing all of that thinking in your head and not invest in this, and it makes such a massive difference. So find time. Also, really think about the words, think about the qualities that you're noticing in those things that you have collected. And always make sure that you find a big range of research, from primary research through to secondary research in blacksmithing, but in lots of other disciplines. We started yesterday talking about theory, and our students are going to talk about theory. Find people that think like you think. They can be working in any discipline, but find those sentences which resonate with your thinking. People that write about their work. And when it's up on the wall, you can reflect on what you have collected. What are the ideas that you've picked up? What are the themes? Really do this exercise seriously. We do it with first-year students, we do it with MA students. The standard of it changes, the rigor of it changes, but you will always see something new. You will always discover something. That's what our staff take this approach as well. And so we're very lucky because we have Bran on film and Bran on person. And we have Cam in person and Cam in film. But this is a Bran in his workspace. Quietly.
everything kind of back in the old that relates to this.
Can we make the volume high for the next film? High there? It was good. Can you hear it at the back? Okay, that's fine then. Okay. So, all the way through the talk, there are these little grey bars, and that's where we've done some research and found an academic, someone else who thinks like we think, and so we've added that in as a quote, and that really is the first step of really engaging with critical theory. And so we want people to reflect, and reflection is a method of turning your experiences into knowledge, is what Brooks and Brooks say. So why is it important to reflect? So like take a moment and stop and think. Different people do it in different ways. We know we all do it in our heads, but a really good discipline is to identify like a time in the week that you know you're going to stop and really think about what you're doing and whether the work that you're doing matches your initial intention, because it's all about intention. So stop and think all of the time. So I do my reflection quite a lot when I'm driving, but, you know, wherever it is, you know, do that reflection, capture those thoughts. And that's really important, because it's only through reflection that you're able to identify the strengths, see those breakthroughs that you've made. It gives a chance for creativity and innovation. And so you start thinking about new ideas and new possibilities. And reflection enables you to start to capture that tacit knowledge, which we all talk about, but make it really explicit. So finding the language and what you have learned, making the tacit explicit. Some other quotes there. And record it. Oh, so important to record it. We all think that we're going to remember those breakthroughs, we're going to remember those reflections, but we don't. I used to think it was because, yeah, we just don't. And so recording is really, really important. Do it in a way that works for you, whether it's your notebook in your back pocket, or whether you write it on a blog or write it on the wall of your studio. Recording is absolutely critical. And so we've got Flynn here talking about, because he couldn't come, so I've got him on film, talking about the importance of recording and reflecting. This is not about the education. These are skills that you've learned that are good for the rest of your life. They're good skills of professionals. And it goes right, if we're talking about a technical journal, the number of times you think, well, I love that, I know exactly how I did that. And then you look back and you're like, how did I do that? So, you know, like that recording, in whether it's about your ideas, process or material, is just so critical to be able to go back, explore and revisit. Oh, I want to say that bit, this bit, higher, higher. The ability to reflect for iterative improvements is critical. What needs improvement? Why should the improvement occur? How are you going to go about improving things? Even if the action is around intuitive process, there must be a level of reflection. Sullivan says, maintaining comprehensive records of creative practice through journals, sketchbooks, reflective writing, not only preserves the evolution of ideas and methods, but also provides a critical framework for informed reflection and future innovation. Your reflection needs to fit your intention, and then you know what you're looking back at. Okay, testing possibilities. Oh, we're back to the bit we all love. So how important it is to like test possibilities. So once you've identified your idea and you're clear about that, you get to really test possibilities in lots of different ways. You have to decide the parameters, so you have to go back to that drawing and be really specific, and really develop the language around what you want to talk about. So that can be through fusion, it can be in the forge, it can be with drawing, and it's almost always all of those things. So really enjoy testing possibilities, but like we were saying, be really clear around recording that so you can go back and revisit and develop ideas further. And that wonderful thing that we need to do in terms of exploring equivalence between material and your subject and your ideas. So really invest in testing possibilities. Again, it's a hard thing to keep doing. I think that various people in the room will talk about how they do it, but I think as a professional, it's really important to give yourself a couple of hours, even when you're doing the busiest projects, to keep like testing and explore. Give yourself play time. Give yourself time to like explore and test possibilities. It will really keep you excited even when you're on that last piece of railing. So give yourself a little time in the workshop, permission to play and explore. When you start off playing, it can start off being, we call it fast and dirty exploring. So get out your cornflake packets or whatever it is and test in whatever material makes the most sense. And then as things progress, things become more analytical and closer. I think that in 2016, we had the Forge exhibition that Heine was in, and we had the pleasure of handling Francisco Gazatoa's forged maquettes, and they are so beautifully done that it's what he gives the engineers to install his pieces on site. So you've got these maquettes this size, knowing that it's like 40 meters tall, but everything is accurately done. So testing possibilities involves the whole gamut from starting those initial tests to being much more focused and refined. As we know, design and developing an idea is not a linear process, it's a cyclical one. And so the actual drawing looks a little bit more like this, which is possibly what you'll recognize your brains look like quite often first thing in the morning, which is that at each stage of the process, there's this constant jumping between testing possibilities and being clear again about the idea and focus on presenting all the way through the design process. So this is Cam talking in his space. He's going to tell us a little bit more about his outcomes later on in the talk, but this is an example of the pedagogy in action. And then, after testing possibilities and making those next set of choices, bouncing back to your intention and being clear about what you communicate, you need to focus on outcomes. Explore the variance, think about the quality of the outcomes, refine things, and really think about the audience and how you want the viewer to engage in your final outcomes. This design process applies to everything and any material. It's not, it's the same. Whatever project you're doing, whether you're responding to grade markers, whether you're responding to a client, whatever material you're working in, it's really important to invest in each stage of that process. And when you don't, you trip yourself up big time. And so spending time ensuring that you follow that process will enable you to make the work that you think about in your head and develop ideas that you want to develop. So having thoroughly explored and refined, the final phase is all about making those refined outcomes. And I'm so excited that I've got a master's program. And I'm so excited to have some master's students here. I'm going to introduce you to all of them in the end, but at the end of the talk. But I'm going to introduce you to Bran first, who's going to come up here and talk about how he has used this pedagogy. Yeah, no, you've got to stand up. Yeah, because then you can tell him when it's from.
Hello, I'm Bran. If I went on to kind of show you like where it was at the end. So those two pieces there, kind of going to talk a little bit about the process of making those two pieces. So, now. So I kind of started that project with a real interest in kind of industrial locations, like that industrial aesthetic. So I went and there's a local steelworks like back in Hereford. I went down like this back alley. They got this beautiful, like old, like steel, like riveted, bolted water tower. And I really enjoyed the aesthetics of that and how that looked. So I knew I kind of wanted to do something looking at that aesthetic and how, like, you know, what my interest in that like came about. So then I kind of,
I think.
So yeah, so I kind of, I populated my like workspace with all these images, and kind of then in like through workbooks and everything, you kind of I'll take an image, do a sketch, like see what is it about it that I enjoy and like. And I kind of through putting it all up on the wall, I realized there was like this like little thing missing, you know, like it was like a big why. Like why did I like it? Why was it interesting? So then kind of through our kind of research modules and like our dissertation, we kind of will go into the theoretical side, like looking at past makers, looking at, you know, art theoreticians and whatnot. And I really kind of went and looked at, you know, some of David Smith's work, like kind of that pioneering use of like industrial materials and sculptural work. And then kind of like the modern day, more like Will Maguire did a project responding to the closure of a coal power plant, like using industrial materials. And then I found like Howard Rosati, he's a kind of an art theorist and writer, had this like brilliant kind of theory on kind of the aesthetics of function and how that like arises, because a lot of like industrial places, they weren't really ever intended to look nice. They had a function, they needed to do a job, but kind of there's something really kind of interesting in that. Like so in my pieces, and instead of it had a job, so it had like, and then an aesthetic resulted. I wanted to give an aesthetic that kind of led to an implied function. So that was like really interesting, kind of following, kind of giving me where I wanted to take the project. So yeah, this is kind of some pictures of kind of that development iteration. So throughout the whole thing, there's so much like testing. And you know, I'll go to the forge, do a sample. I'll come back and then see, oh, that then relates to, you know, this picture I've had up for ages. Then I didn't see that link. It's getting it in our spaces is so important. To kind of like really identify those connections to help push designs forward. Should I hand over? Or,
No, we haven't got space yet.
So I think if we scroll on to the next set of images, so this was my space during that project. So you can see that this was after I'd really like whittled down all the images to just have a couple of key ones. Like before, it was like spreading all the way up. And so these kind of samples all down the bottom, they did actually end up in the final pieces, but I kind of identified some, I don't know if you can see it up there, but from like the structural sections, there was a real like, you know, the channel sections, the I-beam, and I wanted to kind of play with that, you know, having a section in the middle with the raised edges. So these went through and then kind of testing, like picking out some of the, you know, the forms there, and like putting like, holes and like tapered section. And it was really kind of cool coming back like after from the forge, seeing that, oh yeah, this all makes sense. You know, that's where it's come from. I really enjoy it, and yeah. So then from there, I was like, oh, I can. This I took that section there. I was like, well, what if I like, you know, put them edge to edge, and you can start seeing like the progression through in the space. And then like alongside, we've got like our workbooks. We've got like so many sketchbooks where you're recording like all these different stages. Like when I have a breakthrough, like with one piece, about oh, this is how this can work now. You know, get that all in the book, and then from that, even just in the process of writing it up and saying, well, I think, well, I've already got more ideas then from that. So then I can test that then, and from that it just keeps snowballing along. And just yeah.
So it'd be good to talk just a little bit about the Pete Matilla quote later on, but also just give people a little insight into that relationship between theory and practice, what you tackled in your dissertation.
Yeah, so the title of my dissertation was Crafting an Industrial Narrative. And it was all about, I was kind of, with this project, I was looking at the aesthetics a lot, but then there was like the gap of, I said about the gap of the kind of like the whys. And it's the Pete Matilla quote. So one of my like kind of really key inspirations is Pete Matilla, like his kind of use of you know, industrial sections in his work. Not like he doesn't like use it for an industrial aesthetic. I was speaking to him, he can more use it just because it's another material and medium for playing in forged steel. And this is a nice quote from him. My conceptual framework comes from the act of doing, making, thinking. Each new moment emerges from its history and could not be arrived at without it. In this way, the object is continually emerging. To me, they are not resolved static things. Within each is a growth of understanding. That idea that kind of from every test, every sample, every idea, every drawing, every kind of maquette, you know, everything's just building. And like its designs are kind of still fluid. Like I'm looking at past pieces and they're not like the final end thing. Everything is kind of leading into the next. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Over to Mark.
Hello. So my name's Mark, and I like to make interactive things. I like for people to play with the things I make. I like the idea that if I'm taking the time to make it out of steel, which isn't the easiest material to work with all the time, that people should be able to touch it and, you know, enjoy it. And so my dissertation was based on the rules of the game of interaction. And it was kind of exploring, how do we create objects that entice people? Like, why do we hold pens? Why do we sit on chairs and not sit on tables, right? Why do we do these certain things? Why do some things look like we're allowed to touch them and some things, oh, no, I can't touch that, you know? And all the various things that go into forming that understanding. A little bit. So I start off with some modular pieces. I find for myself as blacksmith, I like repetitive process. I find it very relaxing. And I'd really enjoyed my undergraduate, and I'd spent 3 years playing and having fun. And I wanted my final piece to be letting the audience have some fun and creativity and play as well. So I started looking at things like Lego, Meccano, sort of these things that we play with kids. And so I was like, okay, what if I make a big version of that? What if I bulk that up a bit and make a fun version? And so that's what I ultimately set out with. And it's something that you learn through the testing of iterations and ideas, especially if you're going to be turning stuff over to the public, is you have to think not only about testing possibilities at the start and what's possible, but also at the end goal. You finished your object. How are the public going to interact with this? Where is it going to be? How easy is it for them to play? Things that we take for granted, they might not understand. So this piece is just all modular pieces that are bolted together, just nuts and bolts, and using a spanner. Well, most of us just, yeah, okay, oh, yeah, give me a nut, give me a bolt, yeah, off we go. but a lot of the public don't actually have that tacit understanding that, yeah, this is nut, this is bolt, this is a spanner. So you have to imply these things, you have to show these things, whether that's through already having a small part of the object constructed so they can kind of see what's possible, or whether or not it's something that you stood there and being like, oh, you're playing with it as they're talking to you, so they can see what you're doing, and they go, ah, so that's how I do it, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. It's kind of a whole process, not just, right, I've designed this object, I'm going to make the object, that's it, finished, right, chuck it off to the gallery. The whole thing, where is it situated, where's the height of it, if it's placed on a high table, a low table, are you know, what does all these things mean, and how does that impact what people see? So that's basically a test run that I also did with a bunch of of my fellow contemporaries, which was great fun. And they constructed it in a way that I didn't even think it was going to go together. I didn't know it was possible to go together in that way, and that was part of the fun. But this was one of the key quotes by Tim Ingold, who's an anthropologist. What difference does it make if a discussion is grounded in the context of practical activity? How can I create a discussion about creativity through a practical activity? I know I'll create a practical activity that is about creativity. So there we go. That's how I'm grounding that discussion. That's it in its sort of thing. And so I looked at psychology, I looked at objects and how they're positioned, how they're placed, what they look like, all these different things. That theory feeds into the design, into the testing the possibility, into the finished object, which then you test again through the public, and you kind of have all these things go out through the whole iteration. I'm not sure if there's anything else really for me to say. It's kind of me, really. Make things for people to play with. Hand over to Cam.
Right, so yeah, I'm Cameron, and this is my section. So I'm all about mathematics and geometry and sort of the construction of design. So my dissertation was rule of design of observing the axiomatic construction of forging metal sculpture. And with that, I really wanted to look into how, when I was observing what people had made, why they had constructed it the way they had, and how I could interpret that within my own work, and figuring out what it is I really want to get out of the things I was forging and the things that other people were making. Because I was very much, I look at it and I like it. I don't know why I like it. It just looks cool. But I later found on that aesthetic was geometry, and it was the construction of following these rules throughout the entire design process that Brian spoke about, and a mark of going through your sketchbooks, that iteration, that designing, and following that construction all the way through. So I was looking at some Benjamin Betts, who is a mathematician slash philosopher, about really looking at what it's hard to describe just from a construction standpoint, because his way of thinking was, how can I represent the human consciousness through a drawing? And the most common answer that we've gone throughout history was mathematics, because that's always how they interpreted their designs or their drawings, was they constructed them mathematically. So he represented his way of thinking and his way of living through these mathematical drawings, which were a huge inspiration and a huge breakthrough into how I wanted to design my own work. Is it's not just looking at something and designing it because it looks cool. It's following those rules that are linked to our brain and how we naturally function, and then forging them through that and designing them through that rule. So these are a few of my forge samples, sort of testing and like playing with that idea of using geometry to get the aesthetic that I'm most drawn to. So if it's just, simply two set downs and bring it round into a circle, or if it's connecting two pieces into it with a firewire and following that whole two-dimensional drawing that I've gone from that aesthetic, and following it out of one piece of steel and following that two-dimensional drawings into 3 dimensions. So going from that two-dimensional drawing to that 3-dimensional maquette that I'd made into a forge outcome. So yeah, these are a few of the other samples. So this is a short render of 3 of my final 3 pieces for my degree show, which was done in Fusion. And it was just this was a good way of looking at them from those different perspectives as they were created through these geometric principles and my love of geometry. They shift with perspective. So it's when you're walking around the pieces, you are observing it in this different way, the same way when you are holding the foam model or you're looking at a drawing, it's flat from one direction. But if you tilt that drawing, what's the rest of it going to look like? And this is a representation of those things. So this is a bit of the process. So a lot of my work was about the process. It was not just starting out with like the final outcome. I wanted to go through this entire process of forging out of one length of steel, and that I felt really linked with how I wanted to represent these drawings and this geometry that I loved. Was, okay, how can I represent that through the metal? And it was making it out of these one lengths. So I'm going from my set downs, curving it round the anvil, and then finally ending it with the fire weld, and then doing all the final tweaks to it. So these are my final outcomes for my degree show. Scrolling.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are my 3 pieces for my degree show, all forged out of, the stands are separate, but each of the top parts are forged out of one length of steel. And when they're viewed from just any other perspective, you get this sort of jumble and this like mix up of shapes and lines when they're observed through these 2-dimensional drawings that I was going through. So going face on to the side diagonally, each of the segments line up, and you then get to observe those 2-dimensional drawings that I'd begun with. So the circles line up, and that becomes the straight line that you'd see on the drawing from one perspective. Or you change your perspective, the whole piece rotates and different sections of them line up to create those other drawings that you would see. So it was all about sort of bringing those things Brian was talking about, of going through the whole creative process and bringing that into my final outcomes.
Awesome. And then so at the end of the talk, there's a bibliography of all of the references that I made generating this presentation. You might have noticed that this is my favourite subject, and so we've galloped through the pedagogy that we really believe in, and I hope that you've listened from some of those things that you can take back into your own studios and workshops. Definitely invest in printing things out and looking for those connections. We're actually here with some teachers and some other students. If you're from Hereford, stand up. And all of these people would be delighted to chat to you over the next day and a bit about how they develop their ideas, and I hope you've really enjoyed it. I know that we've got fika coming up. I could keep talking I could keep talking about any of these things for a very long time, but hopefully downstairs there's lovely coffee and cinnamon buns. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got, and I'm sure this is us, the Hereford Anvils. If you follow us on Instagram, I'm a chronic overposter. So, but you will see what these amazing students get up to and their journeys, and then also what they do after they graduate. We had some good news yesterday. I feel like it's just a nice thing to share. So Cam, this year in the summer, won New Designer of the Year, and New Designers, that's from 5,000 graduates in all disciplines. And so he is New Designer of the Year for the UK. And yesterday, he's been shortlisted for global creative graduate from across the world. And so you can vote for that online, bit of a plug. But actually, I think one of the things that's most important is I'd be happy for you to come to Hereford talk to any one of these graduates about their journey, how they've applied the pedagogy, and how they found their voice working with steel, how they're developing their craft, because they're all awesome and I love my job. And you're all so passionate, they're so passionate, which is why events like this are so special, because we all talk the same language. So have a fantastic rest of your event, and hi.